evening. What do you want to do tonight?
The same thing we do every night, Pinky. Try to take over the world.
Winter 1886. French archaeologists dig for artifacts in the Christian section of a cemetery in Upper Egypt. Suddenly, they make a discovery that shakes Christian history to its core. What they uncover is the long-forgotten grave of a monk buried in the 8th century. But the real find is what the monk is taking with him to the next world.
Those who buried the monk apparently took this little papyrus book and put it with the monk, so that in a way he could go into the next life with one of his favorite books. It includes not Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, but it includes the Gospel of Peter.
The book apparently is an actual gospel, a first-hand account of the life of Jesus, yet the text claims to have been written by the Apostle Peter. For nearly 2,000 years, everything Christians knew about Jesus came from the Gospels of the Christian Bible, accounts by Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Could this be an actual lost account of the life of Jesus, written by Simon Peter, the hand-picked leader of the apostles? The discovery set off shockwaves throughout the world of biblical scholarship, and that shockwave continues as new gospels, lost gospels, emerge from numerous archaeological digs. The Gospel of Thomas, the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, and even the Gospel of Judas. The discovery of the lost Gospels also reveals a secret battle, now forgotten but once vital. A battle for the soul of Christianity. On the one side is a devout group calling for a direct spiritual relationship with God, with their own set of Gospels. On the other side, a growing hierarchy of Orthodox Christianity that accepts only 4 Gospels. The result of this battle would determine the future of Christianity. But at the very beginning days of the faith, there literally was no gospel and no Christian Bible. Christianity begins around the year 30 AD with a group of Jews who follow the teachings of Jesus of Nazareth.
We tell history through stories, and this was certainly the case with the early Jesus movement. The people that were around Jesus, the poor, the marginalized, they most likely couldn't read or write, so they did what everybody else did. They told stories.
People must have talked to each other. Now, you knew Jesus. What did he say when you met him? Were you there when he was walking down the road? Do you remember the story? What I heard was this.
The stories of Jesus were not written down for decades. Scholars believe the earliest gospel, the Gospel of Mark, was written about 70 AD, 40 years after the death of Jesus. But his was not the only gospel. By the year 200 AD, there were not just the 4 Gospels, there may have been as many as 50. They bore titles like the Gospel of Philip, the Gospel of the Hebrews, and the Revelation of Peter. Some of these books were mentioned by ancient writers, but until recently, these Gospels had all disappeared. What happened to them, and why are there only 4 Gospels today? The answer comes down less to faith and more to politics.
The Bible didn't fall out of the sky. The Bible was finally put together by Christian thinkers who represented a particular point of view.
The surprising fact is that the Christian Bible as we know it didn't really emerge until 300 years after the death of Jesus. And the man who determined the content of the Christian Bible had a powerful agenda that had little to do with religion. 312 AD, a Roman emperor named Constantine, a pagan who believed in multiple gods, claimed to have had a vision of the cross before a battle. After his victory, he became a convert to the religion of Christianity, eventually making it the semi-official state religion. Constantine wanted to harness this new religion in order to unify a Roman Empire that was falling apart. At that time, Christianity was a loosely organized religion, a collection of churches with diverse beliefs and diverse scriptures. The emperor intended to change that.
What he noticed, however, was that these people aren't very well organized. And if there's one thing that Romans knew how to do, it was to get things organized.
In 325 AD, Emperor Constantine convenes the Council of Nicaea to decide the basic tenets of Christianity. He brings together the most powerful church leaders from around the world to discuss legalizing a formal Christian religion.
One of the interesting things is, it becomes clear that what he is primarily interested is in unity. He wants the Christian religion to provide the ideological basis for the empire.
The goal of Constantine's council was to unify the faith, both religiously and politically. After weeks of debate, the various bishops and priests agree on a set of principles that unify all of Christianity and place the religion firmly under the control of the emperor.
And he then used his authority to say, okay, guys, this is it. Things got drastically changed under Constantine. We have a complete redefinition of how God is to be understood. God now is the protector of the state, which then seeks to use the religion for its own purposes, to unify everything, because you can't have much dissent and run a state.
Constantine also unified the Christian Gospels and limited the Gospels he considered fit for the state religion. Though the Nicene Council did not officially decide on the content of the Christian Bible, Constantine made it clear which Gospels he considered acceptable. He commissioned the creation of 50 copies of a Christian Bible, which contained only the Gospels of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. What happened to the other Gospels? In 382 AD, another church council literally banned Christians from reading them. Under the Christian Emperor Theodosius, all other Gospels were considered heresy, were banned or buried, their owners arrested, and sometimes killed.
There were all these other texts that real believing Christians loved. And for a long time, it must have been read until the bishops came around to say, thou shalt not read this, but thou shalt read that.
What was contained in these lost Gospels? What made them so threatening that they had to be banned or destroyed?
And do you see this little window right here? There's a little window that's covered with brown paper. And this abbot right here, here's the abbot of the monastery. He's the man in the very back. I apologize, you can't see my pointer, but he's the man in the very center. I asked this abbot, can we look inside that room? And he said, no, it's not possible. And I said, please? And he said, we cannot. And I said, we've come a long way just to see this place. He said, okay. But he said, no photograph. No photograph. So I do not have a photograph. I want to tell you what's in this room. Now, this is an old monastery. They bake their bread in the sun. They use oil for the lamps. They have no electricity that they use. And we walked into that room, and all of a sudden, there is a room full of computers. Apple computer, Macintosh computer, IBM computer, scanners, satellite boxes. And I said, what are you doing in this room? And the monk became very serious. He said, we have been in this monastery 1,500 years. And we've been very fortunate. because we have never been overrun by a foreign army. We've never been taken over. He said, but we think that this monastery will be destroyed in our lifetime. We think something will happen, that there will be a war in this part of the world, and this monastery will be destroyed. And he said, before that happens, we will scan every page of every one of our ancient texts onto the World Wide Web to preserve for future generations. And this is what they're doing, is they're recording all of the texts that are found in this library for future generations, putting it up onto the World Wide Web. So the question, what is in these texts that's so valuable? What is in these old texts that makes them so powerful? Well, some of the things that are in these texts are icons, pictures of Jesus. This icon was created within 300 years of the death of Jesus from the descriptions of people who lived with him and saw him. This may be one of the closest representations to Jesus that we actually have today. There are old, beautiful, illuminated manuscripts like this. Beautiful books, Coptic, Christian texts. Early Christian Bibles, only 100 or 200, 300 years after the time of Jesus. And this is why I brought you to this monastery. I want to share with you one of these texts. One of the texts that was edited from our Christian Bible is in this monastery. And we saw it, and you'll see a picture of it here. How many have heard of the Lost Gospel of Thomas? The Lost Gospel of Thomas. Some of you have heard of that text. Very, very powerful text. The Lost Gospel of Thomas is powerful because it is believed to be the actual words of Jesus as he was teaching those around him how to use the power of human emotion in his life. Now, I'm going to share two of these images with you. We said earlier, to unleash the force of the divine matrix in our lives, first, we have to understand how it works. And the science tells us how it works. Secondly, we must speak the language that the divine matrix recognizes, and science cannot tell us that. That comes from our past, from our culture, from our history, from those who have learned and used this language for thousands of years. So this is what we're doing right now. We're learning what did Jesus and what did the great masters say about this language. Because it's the same whether you're talking Buddhist or Hindu or Christian, pre-Christian traditions. They're all telling us that there is a field of energy and that we have the language to use that field. This is an actual page out of the Gospel of Thomas. So we know that this ancient gospel actually existed. And you can see some of the letters. These are Greek letters. You can actually read some of, if you know Greek, you can see some of the Greek letters right here. In the Gospel of Thomas, two very important keys. This was written right around 300 years after the time of Jesus. In this gospel, okay, so here's what we're doing. We've been in the Buddhist monasteries in Tibet, and they're telling us that that feeling is the prayer, one. Two, that we must feel as if our prayers have already been answered. Okay, and now we're in an Egyptian monastery with the texts that used to be our tradition before they were edited. And we're going to look at the instructions that tell us how to do that. Okay if we do that? Is that good? Okay. Gospel of Thomas. If you have a copy of the Gospel of Thomas, this is verse 106, translated from the Nag Hammadi Library. And if you do not have a copy, it's in our books, and you can go to any library and pick this up. Verse 106. Look at what the Lost Gospel of Thomas says. It says, when you make the two thought and emotion one. So the Gospel of Thomas is talking about thought and emotion. It's saying when you make your thought and your emotion one, look at what happens. You will say to the mountain, "Mountain, move away," and the mountain will move away. It's saying that when you can marry your thought and your emotion into one single potent force, that is when you have the power to speak to the world. The tumor that disappeared in the woman this morning, that is an example. When those practitioners had the thought of the woman being healed and the feeling and the emotions were all one, the mountain moved, the tumor disappeared. Okay, so this is one place. Now, secondly, when you make the two one, what are they talking about? What are the two? Let's go back to our image. The two, thought and emotion. When the two become one in our hearts, we create the feelings in our bodies. When thought and emotion become one, and you'll see how to do that in just a minute. Let's go back to the Gospel of Thomas, another verse. Now this is verse 48. It says almost the same thing. This was so important that it was recorded at least 3 different times in the same gospel. Look at what this says. If the two make peace with each other in this one house. When Jesus is talking about the house or the temple, what is he talking about? What is he talking about? Precisely you. You are the house. You are the temple. If the two make peace with each other in this house, if thought and emotion become one, if they make peace with each other in this house, look what happens. They will say to the mountain, "Move away," and it will move away. He's telling us again, in a completely different verse, how powerful it is to marry thought and emotion. But they still haven't told us how. How do you do this? That's the next piece. In the early Christian Bible, your Bible today, there is a passage. How many have heard, "Ask and ye shall receive"? Have you heard that before? Ask and ye shall receive. Have you heard that? I know people that ask and ask and ask and nothing happens. Because the asking is not done with the voice. The asking is not done, "Please, please, bring this to my world." That's not asking. To ask, we must speak to the field, to the divine matrix, in the language that the field recognizes. And a language that's meaningful. The field doesn't recognize our voice, it recognizes the power of our heart. Remember this morning, our heart, we have a feeling, creates electrical waves, magnetic waves. That's the language the field recognizes. So when you create the feeling in your heart as if your prayer is already answered, that creates the electrical and the magnetic waves that bring that answer to you. And you're going to see this in just a moment. Ask and ye shall receive. While we still have this passage in our text, in the Bible that you have today, the King James Version, John 16, 23, 24, what you have is the condensed version. You have the edited version. The edited version looks like this. This is the edited version. "Whatsoever ye ask the Father in my name, he will give it to you. Hitherto have ye asked nothing in my name." Okay? "Ask and ye shall receive, that your joy may be full." Okay, this is the edited version. This is so amazing to me because they took out the 2 sentences that tell us how to ask. In the 4th century, when the edits happened, they took those 2 sentences out. Would you like to see those 2 original sentences? Okay, we'll go back into the original Aramaic and we'll look at a new translation. This is the original Aramaic. It begins, it looks very similar. So this is the retranslated version with the missing pieces. All things that you ask straightly, directly from inside my name, you will be given. It says, so far you've not done this, because if we ask with our voice, we have not done this. Now here's the piece that was edited. Here is what was lost. Look at these 2 very powerful sentences. Ask without hidden motive and be surrounded by your answer. Be enveloped by what you desire, that your gladness be full. Look at what it's saying. It's not saying to speak a word, it's saying to be surrounded, to feel as if. If you are surrounded, you are feeling as if your answer has already happened. Be enveloped. If you want the perfect relationship in your life, if you want the healing in the body of your loved ones, feel the feeling of what it is like as if that has already happened. Be enveloped by what you desire, because that is when your thought and your emotion become one. You think the thought of the healing in your loved ones, and you feel the love of that thought. They become one, and that is the language that this field recognizes. Does that make sense? Are you okay with that?